And what we'd have to do, too, is we'd have to establish democratic institutions in society to plan and manage our social economy. We'd have to have planning boards at local levels, regional levels, national, continental, international levels. These would have to include whole communities, consumers, farmers, workers, everyone, not just technicians, not just any single group. We have computers. Larry Schmidt says that by 2020 the whole world will be on a computer. So why couldn't we register these kinds of votes instantaneously? Why can't we have a free discussion? Debates about positions pro and con, for cars, against cars. Have a discussion and have a vote on these things. Obviously, many issues can be decided at local levels. Others, like closing down the coal industry or repurposing the auto industry, require larger scale planning. Global warming, ocean acidification, deforestation, these require extensive international cooperation and really affect global planning. That's manageable, and we have the UN Climate Convention, which meets annually, as I mentioned, and is supposed to be charged with regulating global greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't have any enforcement power. Well, it needs some enforcement power. It needs to be able to say to American auto producers, no, you can't produce these big things. You're killing the planet. Figure it out. Make small cars or don't make cars, so you can't do that anymore. So you need to have different levels of democracy and delegated authority with right of recall for higher levels for representation. This can be worked out. I mean, I spent a little time in one paper about the planning commissions for public utilities in the United States, which are quite interesting because even though public utilities are both a mix of publicly owned and privately owned, mostly privately owned, nonetheless, the actual regulating process is deciding how much electricity is produced, how much water, and these other kinds of utilities get built in the United States. It's actually done through public utilities, which are entirely astonishingly democratic and open, and anybody can go to these meetings and participate and get all the records and everything. It's a kind of a big loophole they left open, but it exists. It's very interesting. Look at Greg Palast's book, P-A-L-A-S-T. He's a very good journalist. A study of public relations called Democracy. I forget the title. Democracy. It's a footnote in my book, but there's more than footnotes. A couple pages discussion of it. It's a very good example of what I would call kind of proto-socialism. And I don't see any reason why that model couldn't be extended to much of the industrial structure in America. Okay. But I was just going to say though that when scientists say, like when James Hansen and other scientists say that we need to have we need to hold CO2 emissions to 350 parts per million over the planet, isn't that in effect calling for essentially kind of a one world government on that? Like global responsibility, taking responsibility for the planet. That's kind of what we have to do. That's the Anthropocene part. We do need to do that. Okay. Fifth point. Democracy can only work in the context of rough socioeconomic equality. When in the midst of the Great Depression, the great Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis, who's called the people's jurist, Louis Brandeis said, we can either have democracy in this country or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. He was more right than he thought. Than he knew. Today we have by far the greatest concentration of wealth in history. So it's hardly surprising that we have the weakest and most corrupt democratic governments since the Gilded Age. If we want democracy, we would have to abolish the great wealth concentrated in the hands of the few. That means abolishing not just private property and the major means of production, but also extremes of income, exorbitant salaries, great property, and inheritance. Because at the end of the day, the only way to prevent corruption in democracy is to make it impossible for people to materially gain by being corrupt, which means by creating a society with neither rich nor poor, a society of basic economic equality in which we're kind of all in the middle economically. And so there's no way to get rich. I think that's the only answer. I think in my view, there's an intrinsic connection between planning and democracy and equality. I just don't think you can have a true democracy